What should I do if my wife finds another man to replace me? That's a good thing. Of course, I should respect her choice and wish her all the best. 3 years after Willow began cheating on me with a younger man, I met an innocent college girl, a little white dress, the clean scent of soap, gentle eyes and delicate features, thin lips pressed softly together, a graceful, curvy figure. She looked about 60% like Willow when she was young. Her dress had gotten caught in the wheel of her electric bike. I got out of the car and helped her fix it. Halfway through, she received a phone call. It seemed to be from the hospital, reminding her to pay the medical fees. She held the phone in silence for a long time before pleading softly. I'm already doing everything I can to raise the money. I promise I'll have it all before the surgery. Please give me a little more time. Okay. Standing beside her, I suddenly remembered the day I first discovered Willow's affair. She had sat on the sofa with reddened eyes and said hoarsely, "Honey, I really didn't mean to cheat on you, but he looks so much like you when you were young. Do you understand?" The moment I saw him, I thought of the younger you, how much you suffered and how many times you stumbled along the way. If someone influential had helped you back then, your life would have been so much easier. So I wanted to make up for that old regret. I wanted to help the person you once were. Please don't blame me, okay? At that moment, I suddenly stopped blaming Willow, because now, I finally understood her. Chapter 01. After I finished repairing the electric scooter, I spun the wheel to check it. Everything worked perfectly. She took out her phone, insisting on giving me a tip. The next second, her phone rang again. I glanced at the screen. It was the hospital calling once more. She answered with a quick hello, and her expression changed instantly. What? Okay, I'll come to the hospital right away. As soon as she hung up, I spoke before she could say anything. Get in. She froze. Aren't you going to the hospital? You look like you're in a hurry. I'll drive you. She pressed her lips together. Without much hesitation, she climbed into the passenger seat. Only after a long silence did I hear her quietly say, "Thank you." I said nothing. I entered the address into the navigation system and drove straight there. On the way, I asked about her situation. Her name was Freya. She was 21 years old, a college junior, and had a 10-year-old younger brother. When she was 15, their parents had died in a plane crash. The inheritance their parents left behind should have been enough to support both siblings until adulthood, but some of it had been taken by their relatives. Then, last year, her brother was diagnosed with heart disease. The little money they had left quickly ran out, leaving them buried in debt almost overnight. Before running into me today, she had just been turned away by those same relatives. I asked her what she planned to do. She turned to look out the window and frowned. There's always a way to make money. When we arrived at the hospital, Freya jumped out of the car before it had barely come to a complete stop. In the blink of an eye, she was gone. I walked into the hospital and checked which floor the cardiothoracic surgery department was on. When the elevator finally arrived at its painfully slow pace, I followed the room numbers until I found the ward. The doctor had probably just finished resuscitating the boy and briefly explained his condition to Freya. Before long, the little boy lying in the hospital bed woke up. Almost instinctively, the anxiety on Freya's face vanished, replaced by a gentle smile. She softly stroked the boy's head and murmured a few words to him. Soon, he fell into a deep sleep again. I looked at Freya's contact, which I had only added a short while ago. After a moment's thought, I transferred 50,000 to her and turned to leave. I had barely taken a few steps when Freya chased after me. Wait. She grabbed my sleeve, looking as though she wanted to say something but could not find the words. I smiled faintly. Just take it. Consider it my good deed for the day. Your brother is adorable. I hope he recovers soon. I knew accepting the money made her uncomfortable, but reality had long since worn down her pride. Her lips moved repeatedly, yet she could not bring herself to say, "I don't want it." In the end, she could only whisper, "I'll pay you back." I waved dismissively and stepped into the elevator. Chapter 02. When the elevator reached the parking garage, I took out my car keys and was about to look for my car when I suddenly heard a soft voice. "Makoto, I think the prenatal test report fell out in the car." My steps halted. I turned my head. Not far away, the door of a red Ferrari stood open. Willow was beside it in a soft, flowing dress, her expression gentle and serene. Another man was bent over, taking a small shopping bag out of the car. Neither of them noticed me. Willow slipped her arm through his, and they exchanged a smile, acting affectionately as though no one else existed. I could not help remembering the year Willow had miscarried. Back then, our careers had only just begun. We did not have enough energy or money to raise a child, but we had loved each other so deeply at the time. Even knowing how difficult the road ahead would be, neither of us could bear to give the baby up. In the end, however, the decision was taken out of our hands. Not long afterward, Willow miscarried. That night, she curled up in my arms, clutching my clothes so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Her eyes were swollen and red from crying as she murmured again and again, "I'm sorry, but what had she done wrong?" My pain was no less than hers. All I could do was hold her tightly, comfort her over and over, and promise her, when this child came back to us someday, they would be the happiest child in the world. At 24, we lost our baby. I had to admit, Willow was smarter than I was. She knew how to make up for her regrets. Look at her now. Willow had successfully gotten pregnant with the child of the man who was supposedly just my replacement. I got into my car, my hands trembling as I tried to light a cigarette, but in the end, I only covered my eyes with one hand and let out a bleak, bitter laugh. Chapter 03. Willow came home that evening. We had been sleeping in separate rooms for a long time. Since we both left early and returned late, most of the time we were more like roommates sharing an apartment than a married couple. Honestly, I did not understand why Willow still insisted on coming back to this house every day. We sat across from each other at the dining table without speaking. The only sounds were the occasional clink of bowls and chopsticks. Willow placed a piece of pork rib in my bowl. I did not refuse it, but even after I had finished the entire bowl of rice, the rib remained untouched. "Hubby, your birthday is next week," Willow said. "Why don't we throw a birthday party? We can invite a few friends and make it lively." I replied indifferently, "Go ahead if you want." Then I added, "But I have a business dinner that day, so I won't be coming home." Willow finally looked at me, a trace of hurt in her eyes. "Hubby, do you really have to keep acting like this?" "Like what?" She pressed her lips together. "I just want us to live a good life together." I could not help laughing. Setting down my bowl and chopsticks, I suddenly asked, "Willow, have you ever thought about divorcing me?" "No," she answered without hesitation. "You've been involved with Makoto for years. Don't you plan to make it official and marry him?" Willow pursed her lips. "Hubby, I've told you before, I don't like him. The only person I have ever loved is you. It's just that he reminds me of you when you were younger. I want him to have a better life. I want him to be happy." I could not understand her, nor did I care to. To me, we were no longer husband and wife. We were simply partners bound together by mutual interests. Whether we divorced or not depended mostly on which option brought more benefits and fewer losses. Of course, she meant what she said. She was not lying. In fact, she had never really lied to me. At most, she had initially hidden the existence of her colleague Makoto. It was only after I discovered their messages that she admitted she had helped Makoto quite a lot. I told her to keep her distance from him, and at first, she agreed. Later, however, she told me she could not do it. She said she could not watch Makoto sink deeper into trouble and pretend not to see it. She could not stop herself from reaching out to help him. I neither cursed at her nor hit her. Yet she broke down crying as though she had suffered some unbearable injustice. I was truly exhausted. Work already kept me busy enough, but even after coming home, I could never have a moment of peace. I was tired and could not be bothered to deal with her. Somehow, she took my silence as forgiveness. After that, she began treating me with extreme care, becoming even more attentive and devoted than before. I knew she was tired too, but what did that have to do with me? No matter how exhausted she was, once she left me, she could always throw herself into Makoto's arms. But what about me? What was I supposed to do when I was tired? Chapter 04. Even though I had already told Willow that I had a business dinner on my birthday, she clearly had plans of her own. That did not surprise me. She had always been someone who knew exactly what she wanted. Since I had to work, she moved my birthday celebration to the office. When I returned after finishing a meeting, I saw the cake she had made herself, along with a gift. "Happy birthday, hubby." Willow stood in front of me with a smile and moved to throw herself into my arms. I walked toward her. Then, at the last second, I shifted slightly to the side and brushed past her. The smile on Willow's face dimmed for a moment, but she quickly put it back on. "Hubby, I ordered food from that private restaurant we used to go to all the time. They'll deliver it soon. Let's have lunch together." "Okay." I gave a casual hum of agreement. Willow had not visited my office for quite some time. Seeing that I was busy, she did not disturb me and instead wandered around, studying the changes that had been made. Then her phone rang. She quickly silenced it, glanced at me, and turned her back before answering. The office was large, and we were standing far apart. I could not hear the person on the other end at all, but the moment she turned away, I already knew who was calling. "What? A car accident?" Willow's voice rose sharply. Remembering that I was there, she immediately lowered it. "I'll come over in a little while." After hanging up, she suddenly remembered that she had promised to have lunch with me. She hesitated, clearly struggling to speak. I kept my head lowered and continued working. "Hubby," she finally forced the words out. "Something came up. I might need to leave for a while." I gave an absent-minded hum. She immediately turned to leave, but when her hand closed around the doorknob, she looked back at me. "I'll come back as soon as I can." "No need." Without looking up, I said, "Go take care of whatever you need to." We both knew perfectly well she would not be coming back today. Chapter 05. That evening, I went to a bar for the first time in ages. I had never liked places like this. They were too loud and chaotic. But once in a while, even I felt like losing myself in the noise. I deliberately chose a newly opened club. When I booked a table, the host asked how many people were coming. Just me. He smiled knowingly. People in our line of work know how to read the room. Would you like me to bring a few girls over to keep you company and liven things up? I swept my gaze around the room before it settled on someone in a corner. The host followed my line of sight. After a brief pause, he smiled. She's our top hostess. She's in high demand. You'll have to pay extra if you want her. I watched Freya sitting between two men, a dazzling smile on her face as they made her drink glass after glass. Money isn't an issue, I said casually. Send her over. Right away. I did not have to wait long. Freya walked over with a bright smile. Hey, handsome, thanks for booking me. I looked up at her. Her words abruptly died in her throat. Long time no see. I made no attempt to hide the way I looked her up and down. Who picked that outfit for you? It's tacky. A flash of embarrassment crossed her eyes, but the smile on her face remained perfectly composed. I learned how to dress from videos online. They said, men who come to places like this kind of style. Sit. I tilted my chin toward the seat beside me. So this is the way you found to make money, working as a hostess at a nightclub? Of course, that was the polite way to put it. To be blunt, she had come here to work as a nightclub model and entertain wealthy clients. Freya said nothing. Have you raised enough for the surgery? She nodded, then shook her head. Not yet, but I'm close. How much are you short? 100,000. When is the surgery? The day after tomorrow. I raised my eyes to her with a faint, humorless smile. You're planning to make 100,000 in 2 days. Are you going to sell yourself? It had only been a joke, but Freya did not deny it. Selling your body isn't exactly an easy business these days, I said. 100,000 is a steep price. Have you found yourself a rich client? Freya pointed toward the booth where she had been sitting earlier. We've already agreed on it. They're going to split the cost. The answer caught me so off guard that I choked on my drink. Freya instinctively reached out to pat my back, but stopped herself and withdrew her hand. Now that she was closer, I could smell the perfume on her. It was a cheap, overly sweet fragrance, and I hated it. I preferred the clean scent of soap she had carried the first time we met. It smelled wonderful. It reminded me of Willow when she was young. Is this your first time? I asked. She gave a soft hum of confirmation. I picked up my phone, tapped the screen a few times, then held it in front of her face. Our chat was open, clearly showing that I had just transferred 100,000 to her. You're still young, and you're a top student at a prestigious university. You have endless possibilities ahead of you. Quit working at places like this. I happen to need a personal assistant. Come work for me. Chapter 06. Freya officially became my assistant. Since she was still a college junior, this also became her first internship. You'd better work hard, I told her. Our company has high hiring standards. I won't give you special treatment just because we know each other personally. Once she took off that tacky fur coat and changed into a well-fitted dress, Freya looked even more like Willow. Whenever she reported her work to me, I would occasionally find myself lost in a daze. So one night, when I discovered Freya working overtime alone until late, I could not help walking over to her desk and rapping my knuckles against it. Freya looked up in surprise. CEO Wong, you're still here? So are you. I raised an eyebrow. I don't remember our company's overtime culture being this intense. She smiled a little awkwardly. I want to catch up as quickly as possible. I don't want to let you down. I straightened up. There's no need to push yourself that hard. Come on, I'll drive you home. She did not stand on ceremony. After shutting down her computer, she said, Thank you, CEO Wong. How is your brother recovering? Pretty well. He's already been discharged. Now he just needs plenty of rest and regular checkups. As Freya spoke, a faint, relaxed smile appeared on her face. Most of the time, her expression was rather distant. Only when she talked about her brother would her features truly soften. I glanced at her, then looked away. As we passed a park, the traffic light happened to turn red, and I stepped on the brake. Under the dim yellow street lights, I saw that man with his arm around Willow as they slowly crossed the street. They were probably heading into the park for a walk together. Willow's attention was entirely focused on him. She did not notice my license plate at all. I rested my elbow against the car door, propped my chin on my hand, and watched the scene calmly. What a heartwarming picture. They looked like the perfect family of 3 from an advertisement. CEO Wong. CEO Wong. Freya called. The lights green. The car behind us honked impatiently. I snapped back to reality, pressed the accelerator, and left the scene I had just witnessed behind. When we arrived, Freya got out of the car and tentatively asked whether I wanted to come upstairs for a while. No, I replied coldly. Then please wait for me. Just 5 minutes. Before I could answer, Freya had already dashed into the building. I watched the motion-activated lights flicker on floor by floor. Suddenly amused, I opened the timer on my phone. She had promised 5 minutes. Not a second more or less. When Freya reappeared, she was carrying an insulated food container. You said the company doesn't encourage overtime, but you're actually the one who works the latest. Freya placed the container directly on the passenger seat. I made chicken soup. I specially bought a free-range chicken, so it's nutritious and tastes good too. Half is for my brother, and the other half is for you. Then, looking slightly embarrassed, she added, I don't really have any way to repay you. All I can give you are little things like this that aren't worth much. She was still an innocent college student, nowhere near as skilled at concealing her feelings as Willow had become. The affection in her eyes was plain to see. Almost instinctively, I crooked a finger at her. She did not understand why, but she obediently leaned closer. I reached out and patted her on the head. I used to tease Willow like this all the time. She would haughtily tell me not to touch her, yet at the same time lean her head toward me and say, go on, touch it again. But I could no longer clearly remember how long ago that had been. Get some rest, I said. See you tomorrow. Chapter 07. Freya's growth was astonishing. She had gotten into the company through my connections, but within a short time, whenever she accompanied me to meetings and business engagements, no one questioned her abilities anymore. Still, anyone with eyes could see just how much help I had given her along the way. My secretary and I were on good terms. During one casual conversation, she tactfully asked whether the effort I was putting into mentoring Freya had something to do with her appearance. She knew Willow well, so naturally, she had noticed the resemblance between them at a glance. I said nothing, which was as good as admitting it. Whenever I looked at Freya, I remembered how much Willow had suffered when she was young and how powerless I had been to help her. Now that I had the means, Freya did not need to endure the same hardships Willow once had. You and Willow, my secretary began hesitantly. I merely smiled and shook my head, signaling that she did not need to overthink it. Even I, one of the people directly involved, had stopped thinking about our future. There was no reason for anyone else to worry about it. There was an industry summit scheduled for the middle of the year, and I planned to take Freya with me. In a way, it was also an opportunity for her. Freya took the initiative to ask me whether I had time to accompany her shopping for an outfit. She said she needed to dress the part and could not embarrass me. I agreed. However, given her financial situation, the most she could afford was an entry-level designer brand. I looked through several options, but none of them impressed me, so I simply took her to another store. CEO Wang. Freya said quietly, I can't afford this brand yet. I laughed. With me here, what are you worried about? She pressed her lips together. I already owe you more than I can repay. How can I let you spend even more money on me? It's only a few outfits, I said. You said it yourself, you're my subordinate, so you represent my image. Isn't it only natural for me to make sure my representative looks presentable? As I spoke, I selected several outfits for her. Go try them on. There were not many customers in the store, so I sat down on the sofa. A sales associate poured me some tea and remarked with a smile that I had not visited in a long time. I nodded. It has been a while. Willow loved this brand, and I used to shop here often. After our relationship fell apart, I naturally stopped coming. We've just received a new collection, the sales associate began. Before she could finish, another pair of customers entered the store. Willow walked in hand with that man, smiling brightly. Makoto, what do you think of this dress? I want to try it on. Perhaps sensing my gaze, she looked up. Her expression froze, the smile still lingering in her eyes. Makoto, standing beside her, also stiffened. At that exact moment, Freya emerged from the fitting room in her new outfit. She was dressed entirely according to my taste, looking like a younger version of Willow. Freya turned in a circle in front of me. CEO Wang, what do you think? I stood up and gestured for her to turn around. I pulled up her zipper, then swept aside the long hair trapped beneath her collar. Only then did I step back and nod in satisfaction. It looks beautiful on you. Chapter 08. George. Willow hurried over and reached out to grab me, but Freya immediately stepped between us. Ma'am, please mind your boundaries. Willow was so furious she almost laughed. You're telling me to mind my boundaries? Do you even know who I am? Who you are doesn't matter. What matters is that George clearly doesn't want to talk to you. I waved at Freya, signaling for her not to be so tense. What a coincidence. I smiled at Willow. Did you skip work to go shopping too? As I spoke, my gaze landed on the man's face before shifting back to Willow. The man instinctively took a step back. To be fair, my wife's lover at least knew his place. He never appeared whenever I was around, nor had he ever intruded on any occasion that held special meaning between Willow and me. I could still vaguely remember the first time I met him. He had dropped to his knees in front of me and apologized through bitter tears. Mr. Wang, I'm truly sorry. I'm shameless and despicable. I knew she was your wife, yet I still couldn't stop myself from falling in love with her. But my feelings for Willow are genuine, and nothing can change that. If you're angry, take it out on me. Please don't make things difficult for Willow. You can hit me or curse me, and I promise I won't fight back. How touching that he cared so deeply for my wife. Willow always said he was a lot like me, but in that regard, I thought he and Willow were the ones who truly belonged together. They were both experts at acting wounded after doing something wrong, as though they were the real victims. Whenever they hurt someone, it was always because they supposedly had no other choice. I noticed Willow's face turning pale as she clutched her lower abdomen. She doesn't look well, I said to Makoto. Shouldn't you take her to the hospital? Willow's face had gone deathly pale, and more sweat gathered on her forehead. Only then did Makoto react. Willow, are you feeling unwell? But Willow continued staring fixedly at me. In the end, Makoto forcefully lifted her into his arms. Before they left, Willow bit down on her lower lip and cast Freya a resentful glance. I looked away, took out my phone, and said to the sales associate, "Ring them up, I'll take all of these." Chapter 09. Freya remained silent throughout the drive back. I parked outside her apartment building, but she made no move to get out. That woman just now looks a lot like me. At last, she turned to look at me. Am I allowed to ask about that? She's my wife, I replied. You've been working at the company for quite some time, so you should know that I'm married. After thinking for a moment, I added, and it isn't that she looks like you look like her. Freya tugged at the corner of her lips. So the reason you've always treated me so well is because you see me as her replacement, right? I sighed helplessly. What exactly do you want to hear me say? That my wife cheated on me, so I found a substitute to get revenge on her. Even I could not help laughing at how absurd it sounded. Freya, does that really bother you so much? Whatever my original reasons were, it's true that I helped you and trained you, isn't it? If that's the case, why insist on digging into the reason behind it? She stared at me, her eyes filled with disappointment, sadness, anger, and countless other complicated emotions. In the end, she said nothing. She simply opened the door and got out. However, she had forgotten the clothes she had just bought on the back seat. I let out a quiet sigh, opened my door, and got out with the shopping bags. I had driven Freya home so many times that I naturally knew which floor and apartment she lived in. But this was the first time I had stood outside her door and raised my hand to knock. When Freya opened the door, her eyes were red. The moment she saw me, she instinctively looked away. What is it? You forgot your clothes. I placed the bags beside her feet and turned to leave. She instinctively reached out and grabbed my wrist, yet stubbornly refused to say anything. I sighed and gently brushed the corner of her eye with my fingers. Your brother is home, isn't he? You shouldn't let him see you like this. Then I said, don't worry, I don't see you as Willow's replacement. You are you, and she is her. Really? I smiled and nodded. Really? Chapter 10. When I got home, the house was completely dark. I turned on the light and only then noticed Willow sitting on the sofa. I was a little surprised. Shouldn't she have been off somewhere with Makoto, wrapped up in each other? After changing my shoes, I headed toward the bathroom to wash up. Willow looked up at me. Hubby, what? She asked. Don't you have anything you want to tell me about that woman today? Her name is Freya. She's my assistant. I looked at her. That's all. Is there anything else you want to ask? The moment our eyes met, Willow quickly turned her head away, as though afraid I might say something hurtful. Since she seemed to have nothing else to say, I continued toward the bathroom. Willow soon followed me, hesitating before asking, you and her? I raised my head and looked at Willow through the mirror. With a faint smile, I said, you guessed right. Willow's face instantly drained of color. As I washed my hands, I continued. I finally understand how you felt when you first met Makoto. Back then, you ran from one company to another in high heels, visiting more than a dozen clients in a single day. Your heels were rubbed raw and bleeding, and I hated myself for being so useless. I wanted to buy you lots of beautiful clothes too, to dress you up like a star. You hid it from me even when you were sick because you wanted me to focus on work. I used to beg God to be kinder to you. Willow, you weren't the only one left with regrets in our relationship. When I look at Freya, it feels like I'm looking at the person you used to be. I can't help reaching out to her either. She resembles you so much that I don't want her to suffer through everything you once endured. Willow, I understand you now. Willow gripped the doorframe so tightly that her entire body trembled. Back then, I wasn't understanding enough. I apologized to her. Now we're even. Then I added, so you won't interfere in what's going on between Freya and me, right? After all, you should understand me better than anyone now. Don't worry. Freya was a little bothered by your existence, but I've already reassured her. She won't come making trouble for you. She's a very sensible and considerate girl. Willow asked, do you love her? I was a little surprised that she would even ask such a question. Of course not, I replied. I don't love her. I just can't help feeling sorry for her. I want to make it up to her properly. Chapter 11. Willow sat motionless in the living room all night. The next morning, I offered to drive her to work. She agreed. It was hardly unusual. I used to drop her off at work whenever it was on my way. Of course, It had been a long time since she had allowed me to do so. During the drive, Willow tried to speak several times, only to swallow the words before they left her mouth. After all, we had had nothing to say to each other for a long time. When the car entered the underground parking garage, Willow did not head toward her own company. Instead, she followed me all the way. When I glanced at her, she merely said, "There are a few details about our latest joint project that I'd like to discuss with you again." Our two companies had long since become independent, but their interests remained closely intertwined, and we still worked together on numerous projects. I said nothing and simply nodded. As soon as we stepped out of the elevator, Freya came over to greet me. "Good morning." When her eyes met Willow's, she paused briefly before greeting her naturally. "Good morning, Mrs. Wang." Willow said nothing, but instinctively reached for my hand. It was an old habit of hers. At important events, whenever she felt that she lacked confidence or presence, she would hold my hand to steady herself. I moved away. Her hand closed around empty air. Her fingers loosened before falling back to her side, treating Freya as though she were invisible. Willow walked straight toward my office without so much as glancing at her. A short while later, Freya brought in 2 cups of coffee. Willow asked me, "Since when do you drink coffee?" "I don't like it." Even so, I picked up one of the cups and took a sip. But Freya said she used to work at a cafe and was very good at latte art. That was why all my coffee was specially made by Freya. Freya smiled. "I've been learning how to brew tea lately. Once I've mastered it, CEO Wang can try some." Willow said coldly, "You already seem quite skilled at putting on a sweet act." "Really? Thank you for the compliment." Freya smiled back. "In that case, shall I make you a cup of tea as well?" Sparks seemed to fly as the two women stared at each other. I took another sip of coffee. Seeing them together, I suddenly felt that they did not look quite as similar as I had thought. Willow had taken excellent care of herself, but age and experience had changed her. She no longer possessed the same vitality she had in her youth. Freya, however, was still at the age when a flower was in full bloom. "CEO Wang, should I postpone the 10 o'clock meeting?" Freya asked. I checked the time. "No need." Then I looked at Willow. "There's nothing else we need to discuss, is there?" Willow remained seated, her expression unchanged. "Then rest here for a while." I paid her little attention, picked up the relevant documents, and handed them to Freya. She stayed close beside me, following my every step. Everything they discussed was business, but the intimacy woven into their words and gestures could not be hidden. I knew Willow's gaze remained fixed on me the entire time, but between a flower that was beginning to wither and one in the height of its bloom, anyone would know which one to choose. Chapter 12. Willow began showing up at the company every few days to see me. Freya asked with an ambiguous smile, "Is Willow trying to stake her claim?" I replied, "Every employee and business partner at Willow's company knows she's my wife, but that never stopped her and Makoto from flaunting their relationship there. Some things don't need to be claimed, and when they no longer belong to you, claiming them won't make any difference." After that, Willow came home on time every day and personally cooked dinner for me. Watching her bustling around the kitchen, I would often feel as though I had traveled back in time, until one evening, when I returned late after working overtime. Just as I reached the door, I heard Willow talking with her best friend in the living room. Her friend said, "Ever since I got pregnant, my husband has stayed by my side every day. He won't let me lift a finger." Willow scoffed. "Men are best at putting on an act. They treat you like a queen while you're pregnant only because they're afraid something might happen to the baby. They can keep up the act until you give birth. Once the baby arrives, you'll understand. All of a woman's suffering begins the moment she has a child. As for me, I'm never having one." Her friend disagreed. "It's not nearly as terrible as you make it sound. My husband has always treated me well." Willow replied helplessly, "You're hopeless. Honestly, you should learn how to keep a man wrapped around your finger." Every time I thought my disgust for Willow had already reached its limit, she somehow found a way to sink even lower. On Freya's birthday, I posted a celebration photo on social media, something I almost never did. No one's face was visible. There was only a cake. When Willow turned 22, I had been at the poorest point in my life. I could not afford a real cake, so I awkwardly stuck candles into a steamed bun and pretended it was one. The cake in today's photo had been custom made at a high price. As Freya blew out the candles and made her wish, I softly said, "Happy birthday." But I was not saying it to her. I was saying it to the 22-year-old Willow. Chapter 13. In the blink of an eye, another month passed. I figured Willow should have started showing by now, but before I left that morning, she asked whether I could get off work early. "We'll see," I replied. Could it be that Willow was finally planning to divorce me? There had been a time when I genuinely wanted to end our marriage. After all, no normal person could tolerate a relationship this broken, but our assets and business interests were too deeply entangled, and there was no way I would simply hand them over to Willow. So she knew perfectly well that as long as she refused to let go, we could not get divorced. Fortunately, people could adapt to almost anything. At this point, whether we divorced or not no longer mattered to me. But if Willow wanted a divorce, she had better show enough sincerity. Freya also seemed a little off that day. She was distracted and absent-minded, losing focus several times during a meeting. In the end, I had to call her name sharply and tell her to pay attention. When work ended, Freya cautiously approached me. I'm feeling a little unwell. Could you come to the hospital with me? I have plans today. I gave her a phone number. This hospital works closely with our company. Call this number if you need anything. They'll arrange everything for you. Freya looked disappointed, but she said nothing more. When I arrived home and opened the door, there was no divorce agreement waiting for me. Instead, the entire house was filled with balloons. My expression remained blank as I considered turning around and leaving. But Willow happened to walk out of the kitchen carrying 2 plates of steak. The moment she saw me, her eyes lit up. Hubby. She hurried over and gazed at me tenderly. Happy 7th wedding anniversary. For some reason, I suddenly felt nauseous. She was wearing heavy makeup and a white dress that looked almost like a wedding gown. The room had been decorated to feel warm and romantic. Willow seemed nervous, repeatedly taking deep breaths. Then she stepped closer, took my hand, and carefully said, Hubby, we've known each other for 14 years and been married for 7. We've been through too much. I know very well that we can never go back to the way we were. But, could you give me a chance? Could we start over? Willow raised her hand. On her ring finger was the ring made from a soda can tab. Back when I proposed to her, the ring had been nothing more than a pull tab, and the proposal had taken place in our shabby rented apartment. We had owned very little then, but our hearts had been full. Now we possessed so much, yet there was nothing left inside us. It felt as though a freezing wind was howling straight through the hollow space in my chest. I was so cold. You said you finally understood the person I used to be, Willow said, but I finally understand the person you used to be too, hubby. We love each other. We were simply out of sync in the way we understood love. Now, can't we correct our mistakes together? Freya is nothing but a cheap imitation. I'm the one who stayed by your side and weathered every storm with you. I studied her carefully, searching her features for some trace of the woman I had once loved, but there was nothing. Not a single trace remained. My phone rang, and I reached out to answer it. Willow caught my hand, a wounded look appearing in her eyes. Don't answer it, okay? I pried her fingers away one by one and accepted the call. A voice came from the other end. Hello, this is the Municipal People's Hospital. The owner of this phone was involved in a car accident. Your number is saved in her contacts as husband. May I ask whether she is your wife? Are you able to come to the hospital now? She's not. Willow suddenly broke down. She snatched the phone from my hand and shouted. I'm George's wife. I am. What the hell is Freya? I hope she dies. Then she ended the call and even raised the phone as though she were about to smash it. But before she did, she looked at me. I merely stared at her calmly and held out my hand. Willow trembled all over. Unwilling yet utterly defeated, she returned the phone to me. Don't go, she said hoarsely. Hubby, you have to be fair. All these years, we spent every holiday and special occasion together. I never abandoned you because of Makoto. Today is our 7th anniversary. It matters, so you can't abandon me either. You're not going, are you? Chapter 14. I thought back on everything that had happened over the years. Willow truly had never abandoned me. But we could no longer return to the way things had been. Even when we lived under the same roof, we were nothing more than strangers. On New Year's Eve, I stayed in the study while she remained in the bedroom. Through their phones, she and that man video called each other. At midnight, they smiled brightly and wished each other a happy new year in unison. She might as well not have come home at all. At least then, I could have had some real peace and quiet. I let out a long breath and asked softly, Willow, is it really so shameful for you to admit that your feelings have changed? To admit that you don't love me anymore? Is it truly that difficult to accept that you betrayed the love you once believed in and fell for someone else? Willow stared at me, the pain in her eyes threatening to overflow. I shook my head. Sometimes, I doubted myself too. After all, some people's love is simply flawed. When I met Freya, I really did come to understand you. But I also finally confirmed the answer. I can't help treating her well because she resembles you. I don't want her to suffer the way you once did. But more than anything, the person I feel sorry for is the Willow you used to be. If time machines existed, I would pay any price to go back and give that Willow a brighter, more beautiful life. I keep thinking about how unlucky she was, enduring so much hardship for the man I used to be. Willow choked back a sob. So you see, hubby, you still love me. You feel sorry for me. You can't bear to let me go. She clutched my sleeve tightly. If that's true, why can't we start over? Because the Willow I loved is already dead. I truly don't love Freya. But if you insist on comparing yourself to her, then you really don't carry any more weight in my heart than she does. When I look at her, I remember the beautiful parts of the past. But when I look at you, all I remember is your selfishness. Your ugliness, my disgust, and your betrayal. Willow, admit it. You stopped loving me a long time ago. There may be many reasons why you refuse to divorce me and why you want us to start over, but one of those reasons is definitely not that you still love me. Chapter 15. By the time I reached the hospital, Freya had already been brought out of the operating room. One of her limbs was in a cast, and there were scrapes on her face, but she was still conscious. When she saw me, she gave me a shy smile from the hospital bed. I'm sorry, I've made you worry about me again. Did I interrupt something? I'm really not badly hurt. You didn't have to come. I walked over, pulled out a chair, and sat down. Wasn't that the whole point? Then I added, it's fine, I'm already here, and seeing you puts me in a better mood than seeing her. Freya's smile stiffened. I looked at her in confusion. What? Am I wrong? Didn't you do this because you knew Willow had spent a long time preparing for our anniversary and didn't want me to go home? Next time you want something like that, just tell me directly. The only reason I went back was because I thought she wanted to discuss our divorce. Freya's uninjured hand tightened around the bedsheet. After a long silence, she asked, did I cross the line? You've tested my boundaries plenty of times already, haven't you? I replied. There's no point competing with Willow for my attention. I suggest you focus on your work instead. Your progress has slowed down lately, and I'm not satisfied. I didn't invest all this effort in you just so you could waste your time on things like this. And surely the only thing you want from staying by my side isn't the title of Mrs. Wong. Freya's face was already pale. Now that I had bluntly exposed her intentions, she could not utter a word. There's no need to deny it. I don't mind. You really are a lot like Willow, not only in appearance, but in personality too. You didn't actually think I believed a 20-year-old college student who had only met me once had fallen in love with my soul at first sight, did you? With Freya's personality, she would never have revealed her desperate circumstances to a complete stranger. Perhaps she had begun plotting from the very first moment she saw me. Just the right amount of vulnerability, just the right amount of stubbornness, and a perfectly timed chance for me to play the hero and rescue her from a life of degradation. She desperately seized every opportunity she could, hoping to use me as a stepping stone to climb higher. But she had indeed reminded me of many beautiful moments from the past, memories I had almost forgotten, and I wanted to see just how far someone like her could go. Freya asked softly, what if I told you the only thing I truly want is to become Mrs. Wong? I laughed. Then you'll have to work hard. When the day comes that you surpass Willow and can offer me equal value, that title can naturally become yours, though by then, you might have already met your true love. I'm not like Willow. Freya looked at me seriously. I admit I had ulterior motives when I first approached you, but a long time ago, you don't need to explain. I raised a hand to stop her. I don't care what kind of feelings you have for me. I'm giving you 2 weeks of medical leave. Once you've recovered, remember to return to work as soon as possible. I had no interest in taking care of a patient. I had only come because visiting someone in the hospital was preferable to continuing to argue with Willow. Since Freya was not seriously injured, it was time for me to leave. George. It was the first time Freya had called me by my name. One day, I'll make you truly see me. Her eyes shone brightly. For the first time, I felt that her gaze carried real weight, not as the shadow of the Willow you once loved, and not as a replacement for the Willow of today. I want you to look at me and see only me. Just Freya. I shrugged and replied casually, then do your best. Chapter 16. After leaving the hospital, I took a deep breath and looked up at the sky. The night was beautiful. With nothing else to do, I drove up the mountain to look at the stars. Willow and I used to have a secret spot there, but the path had long since become overgrown with weeds, and I could no longer find it. Time moves on, the stars shift, and even the person who once loved me can disappear, but that was all right. I would always remember that I had once stood beside someone I loved deeply, someone who had loved me just as deeply, and watched the most beautiful stars together. That was enough. A firefly slowly drifted in front of me. I reached out and gently enclosed it in my hand. The light at the tip of its body flickered on and off. Geo. I looked up. For a moment, I seemed to see the young Willow standing in front of me with a radiant smile. She spun around and pointed at the countless fireflies covering the mountainside. Look how beautiful these stars are. Willow. I've already seen the stars. I opened my hand, and the firefly fluttered unsteadily away. Willow, I'm going to move forward now. She cupped her hands around her mouth and shouted toward me. Then take great strides forward and never look back. I'll cross mountains and rivers and find my way back to you someday. Then I'll keep walking beside you. I smiled. All right. I'll go and find you in the future. What would she be like in that future? As I wondered, my heart filled with anticipation. Chapter Extra 1. George and Willow's marriage finally came to an end in their 8th year together. Willow had secretly terminated her pregnancy, and during the argument that followed, Makoto stabbed her in the chest. George rushed to the hospital in time to see Willow one last time. It had been a long time since he had taken a careful look at her face. With someone as young and beautiful as Freya by his side, someone who seemed like an upgraded version of Willow, Willow appeared all the more faded and worn by age. Willow lay on the hospital bed, her fingertips twitching slightly. She seemed to want to hold George's hand one last time, but in the end, she merely smiled at him. Are you happy? She drew a labored breath before asking again. I'm going to die. George simply looked at her calmly. The hatred between us was never so deep that I would wish for your death. He was a sentimental man who found it difficult to let go of the past. Otherwise, he would not have remained entangled with Willow for so many years. But despite his sentimentality, he had always seen things clearly. He knew the flaws in his own personality. So even though he looked back again and again, he never stopped moving forward. Don't forget me, Gio, Willow whispered. Don't forget me. Her voice faded into the air. Even in death, her eyes remained open. So until her very last second, George's figure remained firmly imprinted on her retinas. George stepped forward and slowly closed Willow's eyes. Willow's death caused considerable chaos. Fortunately, she had made a will long ago, and she and George had always maintained the public image of a loving married couple. As a result, George inherited everything under Willow's name without difficulty. Yes, everything. Willow had first drafted that will when she was 23. At the time, their careers had only just begun. They were so busy that they barely had time to rest, often sleeping only 2 or 3 hours a day. Perhaps they had worried that one of them might suddenly die from overwork, and that the person left behind would have to go through a complicated inheritance process. So they each made a will leaving everything they owned to the other. Many years had passed since then, and George had long since revoked his will. Willow had not. Every year, she updated hers, revising the assets and terms listed within it. Only the final sentence had never changed. All property and assets under her name were to be inherited by George. No one knew what Willow had truly been thinking, and now, no one ever would. The living could never keep arguing with the dead. Chapter 2. After everything had finally fallen back into place, George went to see that man. In prison, he had been locked up for manslaughter. George had not gone out of his way to destroy him. He had merely forced him to return all the money and property he had obtained from Willow over the years. You said you wanted to see me. Is there something you want to tell me? Separated by a pane of glass, George sat down across from him, dressed in a prison uniform. The men looked worlds apart from George. In truth, they had only ever borne a slight resemblance to each other. It was only because Makoto had deliberately copied George's style of dress over the years that people thought they looked alike. In the end, you still won, Makoto said. George looked mildly surprised. I didn't realize we were competing. Makoto frowned. You always manage to act as though nothing matters to you, he murmured. Only now do I understand the meaning of the saying. It is precisely because one does not contend that no one under heaven can contend with him. George had asked for a divorce. Yet Willow had refused to give up her place as his wife, even at the cost of her life. Makoto, meanwhile, had bent over backward to please her, only for Willow to abort the child she was carrying for him. God only knew what Willow had truly been thinking. It was not as though Makoto had gained nothing from her, but looking back, all he had received was the small amount of money that had slipped through her fingers, while everything Willow truly had still belonged to George. Perhaps her guilt had made it impossible for her to face George. She could only deceive herself, because falling in love with someone else was far easier than earning her husband's forgiveness. That was why Willow had refused to divorce him. She knew perfectly well that once the divorce was finalized, everything between her and George would truly be over for good. Makoto sighed. What a shame. I was hoping to squeeze one last fortune out of her. Then Freya suddenly appeared by your side, with someone new provoking her. Willow could no longer keep pretending not to see what was happening. Her blind devotion to me was nowhere near what it used to be. George asked him, was it worth it? I simply lost the gamble. The men shrugged. I made the bet, so I'll accept the loss. Besides, I took a life in exchange, so I can't say I came away with nothing. Once I get out after a few decades in prison, I'll still be one hell of a man. George actually admired his attitude. Perhaps he ought to learn how anyone could be so carefree. Chapter 3. In the second year after Willow's death, Freya chose to pursue her career abroad. She had grown under George's protection all these years, but sooner or later, every bird had to spread its wings and fly. George looked forward to seeing just how high she could eventually soar. Before I leave, can I have a hug? In the crowded airport, Freya smiled as she asked him. George could no longer remember when Freya had begun lowering all her defenses around him. She was like a hedgehog that had tucked away every spine, leaving only its soft, vulnerable belly exposed. It was obvious that she did not truly want to leave, but they both understood that unless Freya carved out a place in the world that belonged entirely to her, she and George would never have a future together. Have a safe journey. I wish you a bright and successful future. George finally reached out and embraced her. Just as he was about to pull away, Freya tightened her arms around him. "George," she asked hoarsely, "can you finally see me now?" George smiled. "I've seen you for a long time." He did not want to examine too closely how much of Freya's affection had once been calculated and how much had been sincere. The days they had spent together were real. Standing side by side and supporting each other had been real. Every moment when their eyes met and they smiled at one another had been real. All that mattered was cherishing what they had in the present. Chapter 4. By the time George turned 30, he had already become a prominent name on the country's wealth rankings. One of his company's most important clients mentioned that his daughter was graduating that year. She did not want to join the family business, so he asked whether George had any suitable positions available for her. That client held the key to the company's most important project of the year, so George immediately agreed. "Of course we do." This was their all-important client. Even if no suitable position existed, George would create one. On her first day, the client's daughter came to report for work. Fresh out of college, she had a sweet, innocent air about her. Her hair was tied into a bun, and she looked adorably naive. George thought that perhaps he really was getting older. These days, he found himself particularly fond of well-behaved young women like her. That gave him the strong sense that, as her senior, he naturally ought to take good care of her. "You're Anna, right?" George smiled warmly. "Your father told me about your situation. Is there any particular position you're interested in?" Anna nodded. "I want to be your assistant." An assistant? That was hardly an easy job, but George thought it did not matter. He could simply create a position tailored specifically for her, his personal assistant, whose only responsibility each day would be to unlock his office and turn on the lights. Chapter 5. The new assistant was exceptionally dedicated to her work. She was never late and never left early. She also often brought homemade meals and all kinds of desserts to share with her co-workers. Everyone knew she had gotten the job through connections, but it was difficult to dislike someone who looked so sweet and harmless and had such a kind personality. As a result, everyone got along with her very well. George was more than happy to see that. As long as Anna was happy, his funding remained secure. Still, there was one question that puzzled him. Exactly when had Anna started taking care of all three of his daily meals? He thought back in confusion. It seemed to have started one day when he passed by Anna's desk and commented that her food smelled delicious and looked appetizing. Anna's eyes immediately lit up. "Then shall I bring an extra portion for you tomorrow, CEO Wang?" With the other employees watching, George did not want to reject her kindness, so he nodded. "As long as it isn't too much trouble, it's no trouble at all." From that day on, there was no stopping her. George could not understand how a pampered heiress born with a silver spoon in her mouth could be so passionate about cooking, and so good at it. Chinese cuisine, Western cuisine, regional specialties from all over the country, baked goods, and desserts, she could make them all. He had been eating her food for nearly a month, and she had yet to repeat a single dish. He had even gone out of his way to confirm that Anna had truly cooked everything herself and had not asked her family's chef to do it for her. She was far too domestic. Whoever married Anna in the future would probably gain 20 pounds in a single month. At the company's year-end party, George was so pleased that the company's revenue had reached another record high that he drank a few extra glasses. Anna had gotten in through connections, and she was also allergic to alcohol, making her the only person who did not drink a single drop. "I'll take CEO Wang home." Anna said goodbye to the others. George was tipsy, but nowhere near blackout drunk. It was simply his nature to become quiet after drinking too much, so he kept his eyes closed and did not say a word for the entire ride home. "You can go now," George said as he collapsed onto the bed. "You don't need to look after me." Anna did not listen. She made do with the guest bedroom and stayed the night. George slept very deeply. For the first time in a long while, he dreamed of Willow again, the young Willow. She told him she was leaving. "Will you come back?" George asked. Willow smiled brightly. "No, Gio, you already have someone who loves you, so it's time for me to leave too." George's eyes flew open. His gaze met Anna's. Sunlight stubbornly squeezed through a gap in the curtains and fell across Anna's eyelashes. She was very close to him. Her eyes were filled with deep, unmistakable affection. George froze. Anna sprang to her feet in panic. She turned in two awkward circles, touched her nose, then her hair. "Well, I made porridge, millet porridge. Your refrigerator was practically empty, so I ordered groceries and filled it up. You haven't had a cleaner come by in a while, have you? I couldn't sleep last night, so I cleaned the entire place from top to bottom, and just now, I temporarily lost my mind. Could you pretend you didn't notice anything? Are you hungry?" She rambled on and on. George slowly sat up and leaned against the headboard. "Anna." Her rambling stopped abruptly. "Do you like me?" George asked. Anna lowered her head and gave a soft hum of confirmation. George felt a headache coming on. He rubbed his temples. "When did this start?" She answered. Since I was 15. George paused. We've met before. He had assumed the day Anna joined the company was the first time they had ever seen each other. Anna nodded. We have. Chapter 6. Anna had fallen in love with George at first sight. That year, George had only just married Willow, and the two of them had come to Anna's family company seeking a business partnership. As expected, they were turned away. Anna had witnessed scenes like that many times growing up. She could not say whether people like them were being persistent or simply bothersome. After all, everyone had their own position. She had just finished school that day and was passing by George and Willow in the family car. Even beneath the blazing sunset of midsummer, George carried Willow on his back after she twisted her ankle. There was a tender smile on his face, without the slightest trace of discouragement or bitterness. Anna instinctively gave him a second glance, and that glance became the first of many. Later, without George ever knowing, she saw him numerous times. She watched as he and Willow built their business from nothing and turned it into an empire. She watched their relationship change from passionate devotion to a marriage in which their hearts gradually drifted apart. George had matured considerably and no longer resembled the young man he had once been. But Anna realized that she still liked him. She had loved the disheveled yet relentlessly determined George of those early years, and she still loved the mature, reserved, and composed man he had become. That was why she came to his side. She knew George did not love her. There was almost a 10-year age gap between them, and he had not even viewed her as a woman, but simply staying beside him, watching him, keeping him company, and preparing his 3 meals every day was already enough to make her happy. You don't need to feel burdened because of my feelings, Anna said. I won't use them to pressure you or force you to take my love seriously. George, I do love you, but you're free. Chapter 7. At the age of 35, George remarried. His wife was 10 years younger than him, and the public had plenty to say about their relationship. Some accused George of chasing a much younger woman, but people familiar with the couple stepped forward to clarify that she had loved George for years and had been the one to pursue him. Others claimed she had married him for his money, only for internet users to uncover that she was an heiress from an extremely wealthy family and had no need for his fortune. Some looked on coldly and predicted that a relationship with such a large age gap could never end well. But none of the gossip could disturb the two people who truly loved each other. George was no longer the man he had once been. He knew how to hold on, and he knew how to let go. When he saw happiness, he reached out and claimed it, and if pain ever came to him again, he would also know how to release it. He would live a good life, because there were many people who loved him, including George himself.